Hi, everyone. This is Olga Mack, building the future of contracts from home. And today I am with Laurie. Laurie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, nice to meet you. I started the legal operations function at Cognizant. We had a couple of loose things going here and there before I started, and I kind of pulled everything together and approached it from how can we deliver services better to the organization? How can we be more efficient? How can we lower the lift that people need to have in order to interact with us and get the services that they need? And we, also just a lot of work collecting data so that we could know what was happening, who was actually part of the department and what teams they sat on, having more accurate financials. So it's been an exciting journey.
Really cool. So tell me more about yourself, kind of how you came to this role, what you did before, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about Cognizant.
So I started my career as an intellectual property attorney, and I was in big law for about 7 years, and I went in-house, and I've been at Cognizant since. And I started at Cognizant as a commercial transactions attorney. At first it was just kind of marking up agreements in a vacuum, not really understanding the business. And then as I got more enmeshed in the company and really started learning the business, it just, I think it elevated the services that could be provided to the business team, but also just, enriched my own experience, which I really love that. I was my last role in commercial transactions before I moved to legal operations was chief counsel for our insurance vertical, where I partnered with the business team, not just on contract issues, but on product development, on employment issues, immigration issues, and just really worked on how do we as a company operate more efficiently around the areas that I touched.
So, the good news, the best of us started intellectual property lawyers. You and I have this in common. I do feel like because it's one of those areas that is so closely related to technology and processes that these are more versatile lawyers who are open-minded about technology tend to have at least some either security, privacy, or intellectual property background. So high five to that. I really love you mentioning about kind of understanding business better so you can have a greater impact. I would love to kind of understand how you, what did it mean in your case, and kind of how did you go about learning more about the business of your business?
So some of it you just get from osmosis. You negotiate enough deals with enough people and talk about what it is, and you start, seeing the conversations as you go through negotiations. You learn a lot. But then I spend a lot of time just talking offline. I started creating some periodic meetings with my business leaders to find out what they were worried about, what was driving them, what their goals were for the next quarter. And I learned, I was able to learn a lot through that. And then Cognizant started a project a couple of years ago called Amplify, which was about adding more consistency in our offerings. And I ended up becoming the attorney that was helping through that process. And so it was really a deep dive into how do we create great solutions for our clients, and how do we make sure that when we deliver those solutions that we're successful in delivering them. And so that really was able to elevate my understanding. And then the last thing I did is the company launched an intranet a couple of years ago. And I was tasked with, I chose to do the all the pages for the legal team, which was a blast. It was just such a different track of interest than being a lawyer, and I just love doing the graphic design of the pages. But sorry, I digress. So in doing the intranet, it was really building this library of resources for people that are at Cognizant to understand every aspect of the company, so what the legal team does, what other corporate functions do, but also, what are we selling to our customers? And so I've spent a lot of time on these intranet pages, just learning more about the business. And it's a tremendous resource.
Yeah, I find it really interesting how much one will learn by doing, and two, how much the side projects become the job itself.
Yes.
And become highly transformative, whether you do it at your current job or whether you do it, as a volunteering extracurricular activity at night on weekends. They, often start out as small and exciting, and then they kind of take over your life and become even more exciting, and then completely transform your career. That certainly happened to me. So I just love that story. IP lawyer, then on the transactional side in-house, learning a lot about business, and then you fell into the sort of legal operations services. So tell me how that happened to you.
So I was doing all this work. So I wanted a promotion, and I went to my boss and I said, "What do I need to do to get a promotion?" And she said, "Well, you have to do, great work at what you're doing, and then you have to be seen as contributing significantly to our team, and be seen as contributing significantly to the company as a whole." So I joined our Women Empowered group, and I put on, tons of different events for women in New York City. And I started thinking about for our group, how can I help us be better as a group? And so I created a lot of knowledge management resources. I centralized a lot of our forms. I created some email lists for more efficient communications. I started building the intranet pages, and I created kind of an intake process for our new deals. And then there were a handful of other projects that I was doing, and I was like, you know what? I'm spending all of my nights and weekends doing all these side projects. And you know what? I'm really excited. When I do these projects, I lose track of time. And I don't care that I'm, working till 4 a.m. or just gave up my entire Saturday because I needed to get this, this process flow correct, or because I, needed to, line up the text the right way. I also, I wanted the opportunity to understand not just my function, but how the whole department works. And so I felt that if I, decided to reach for a legal operations role, I'd really see the underside of a legal department, and it would free my time up to really create meaningful experiences for the business people that I supported, so that their experience working with legal would be elevated. So I went to, at that time, the deputy GC who was kind of dealing with the operations and legal function. I said, "Hey, I want to do legal operations. Can we start this? Can we create legal operations at Cognizant? Can I work on these things?"
I love it when the fun takes over your life, and then you create your job. The best job, the last couple of jobs I created my jobs, and those are the best jobs I've had, because instead of being a square peg trying to fit it into maybe a round hole, and maybe I'm an octagonal peg, or maybe I'm even round in the process. You kind of really build on the strengths you have and the interests you have, and write the job description around what interests you and adds value to the organization. It's just so much more a satisfying place to be, and exciting when other people, especially leaders, kind of recognize it, see you for who you are, and then they say, "We need that. Let's design a job around it."
Yeah, I will say it wasn't all, doing legal operations came with the things that I really wanted to do, but it also came with a host of things that were completely unfamiliar and things that I ever thought I would want to do. So I started doing that. I was still doing the chief counsel job because we didn't have the right person to take over right away. And I still have nightmares about my first month, which happened to coincide with the budgeting process for the next year, and sitting there with these huge spreadsheets of numbers and just crying, going, "I don't know if I can do this."
Yeah, I find that the financial knowledge is something that I think should be taught in law school. I usually say that you go to law school and they teach you great, and then you become really fluent in it, and then you release into the wild, and it's an English-speaking world out there. You speak legalese, they speak, most businesses speak financials. And then you present, as you progress through your career, you present it with all this financial, and you're like, oh, like, how come I am such a novice to this, and everybody else seems to really be fluent in this?
At least when I went to law schools really train the litigator, and they don't do a very good job of training the business attorney. in terms of like the skill sets that new law students will get today, I've been very happy to see a lot of law firms pushing law schools to train their attorneys not just on case law analysis, but also on technology, which to me, like that, there is such a gap between where we need to be on technology versus where we are, both in terms of what's being used, but also people's comfort with interacting with it.
Yeah, technology, process, financial acumen, emotional, all kinds of skills. I think law schools are doing better. I do think that change will take some time. And I think over time we'll completely revamp our law school curriculum, especially because law schools are 3 years long. You have plenty of time to teach law plus everything else. So business schools are 2 years and they have plenty of time. So I think there is definitely hope, but you just have to have the will. You talked a little bit about sort of data and knowledge management and kind of building processes and gradually transitioning to the legal operations role that you sort of planted a seed and nurtured and kind of created for yourself, which I love that proactive approach. But love to just kind of understand your vision for the law department of the future. If you were to close your eyes and imagine a perfect law department, what would it be? What would it have? How would it be different?
It's so funny that you use the word perfect, because I was spending a lot of time thinking about this recently, and I came up with an acronym for the ideal law department. So the ideal law department in my mind is integrated, data-driven, efficient, agile, and leading.
I love it. Ideal. I really love it. Did you share it with the folks in your department?
Not yet. I just came up with it like 2 nights ago. I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's an acronym.
That is perfect. That is something worth rallying your whole department around. It's what kind of department do you want to be? Ideal.
Exactly.
That's like a perfect place to be. That's really interesting. You mentioned data a couple of times, and it has sort of become a buzzword to some extent, and means a lot of things to a lot of people. Practically speaking, where do you see data be useful in-house, and where have you used it or implemented it, and where do you think you want more of it?
Yeah, I agree it's used as a buzzword, but I think it's a lot more than buzzword. I don't think that there is any area of legal practice in-house that couldn't be improved through using data to inform the decisions you're making. So if we take a minute and look at contracting, which is obviously an area that I know very, very well, I really think that, and I don't know any company that's really fully there in terms of what you could be doing with the data. But I think if you wanted to have the best operations that you could have around the contracting function, you would want a data loop where you have information about the deal initially coming into the legal team and marking things up based on whatever playbook you have in place. And then as the contract is operationalized and as delivery has its bumps along the way, each of those bumps is a data point that then can come back to the legal team and inform them in terms of how they mark up deals in the future, or what terms we want to agree to, not just legal terms, but business terms that we want to agree to in the contract, so that you decrease the overall risk, you increase the potentials of revenue, and you don't spend time necessarily on things that don't actually end up mattering when you go to operationalizing the contract. So that's like on the how you improve the operations of the whole company. And then in terms of additional data points for that, if you know the volume of contracts that are coming in, if you know how much time it takes to review a contract, if you know where the bottlenecks are, or where you have a mismatch of resources, you can better optimize how that process is laid out, what parts get automated, whether you have the right resources, having the right resources, stratifying your resources. But you need that underlying data of what you're doing and where you have
successes and failures in the actual process of the contracting.
I'm so glad you talk about contracting.
I know it's your sweet spot too.
It's like my favorite subject, right? And at Parley Pro, we're very much thinking we are very data driven with contract lifecycle management platform, and so we think about data at every stage of the way, from creation to negotiation to management of contract. I like the way the feedback loop that you are imagining and describing is definitely helpful. Because contracts are full of legal information, but they also have a lot of business information, and most business professionals are blissfully unaware what's in it and underutilize the information that is in their contracts, and therefore they are not nearly as advantaged as they could have been if they had actually had access and an ability to process that information at scale. And data allows you to do that, right? It allows you to kind of learn every step of the way. And what I like that you recognize that there is a lot of learning on the contract side in creation and then negotiation and management, and all of that data could make you enrich your understanding and make and help you make much better decisions and just really make predictions about future and operate your business. Contracts are definitely good examples of that. Are there any other examples where your company has used data, and if so, how or where are you planning to use it?
I think that litigation is an area that there's a lot of opportunity. For one of our clients, we did work on designing a system. It was an insurance company, and obviously insurance companies deal with the volume of litigation and claims handling is much higher than just a company like Cognizant. And so they were looking for ways to gather data on all of the different cases that they had, and which judges they were in front of, and which types of claims claimants were successful on, and which types of claims they usually won, and which court system led to which results. So they could really look at the data when a claim came in and decide much earlier on in the process whether it made sense to settle that claim when it first came in, or whether it made sense to allow it to continue through litigation.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. The litigation is a little different, right? It's kind of more a traumatic event as opposed to daily good event.
Right. But although for an insurance company, it is a daily event. It's not. It's part of the actual operations of an insurance provider.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I mean, the other thing you mentioned in this answer and the previous answer about sort of the risk, which is what we are trained as lawyers to mitigate, but also the value creation that you can do with data. In the insurance company, litigation is part of their business, and they're they definitely have costs, but there's also value created in the process. Same with contracts. Every time you close a deal or purchase something, you're adding value. And to this day, if you ask anyone in the legal department, any legal leader, how can we increase value 10%? You'll get a puzzled look, because we know how to answer, or risk, how to decrease risk 10%. We know how to talk about any individual contract, but we're not talking about it at scale.
Right.
Across all of them, right? And that makes it really a difficult question to answer. Yet, if we can answer that question, we can provide so much more value to the business.
That's actually why, in an ideal, integrated is the first word that I had there. That we need to be, with the business every step of the way, looking at their data, them looking at our data, so that we can, we're not operating in just like this single contract vacuum. We are steering the entire company in the right direction.
Yeah, I really love that idea. It's really special. I love it a lot. So let's talk about what's needed to support law department of the future. We talked about kind of what's possible, but at some point there is a gap between now and possible. And the gap is what's needed to get us there. What do you need to get your law department into that bright future?
I think it starts with attitude. So, there's obviously people, processes, and technology, and there are changes and additional tools that we need in each of those areas. But you need to start with the premise of wanting to be that ideal law department. You need to think, I want to be, I want to think like a business. I want to, be able to delight my customers. I mean, obviously legal is also a gatekeeper. And so it's not about delighting necessarily each person that comes to you for support, that you're going to give them the answer that they want, because that's not our job in legal. But it's about making the interaction with them easy for them, and about giving them transparency into when they're going to get the answer and what form that answer is going to take and how it's going to affect what they're doing, so that there's predictability in their lives. So you have to want to get to that point. You have to want to not be a black box of the past legal department. Just like business today is insanely fast-paced and disruptive and constantly changing, the people in the law department have to start getting comfortable with change, that there is going to be continuous improvement. Everyone should be driving for continuous improvement, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that your processes are going to change. The way you interact with the businesses are going to change. The tools that are available for you to use are going to change. And we shouldn't be, as a community, we should find ways to get more comfortable with the idea of change.
Yeah, those are critical. Let's start with an attitude, because that's a big one. You mentioned delight, you mentioned transparency, you mentioned predictability. Those are, great words that are increasingly expected from a legal department. They may or may not have been part of the past of any specific legal department. So if I were a general counsel, and what would you recommend me do? How do I change people?
Well, I think it actually starts with, to some degree, hiring the right people. There's a lot of noise out there right now about whether we call people who are not lawyers, non-lawyers, or use other appropriate professional titles. And there's a little bit of a myopia or a prejudice, I think, in some of the historic legal community, that the lawyers are the only valuable resources in a legal department. And I don't think in the future legal department that can be the case. I think you need to have project managers, you need to have data analysts, you need to have technologists that are part of the DNA of your department. And then you also need to have, the diversity that is so important, and that finally people are waking up and saying, oh yeah, we need people of color, we need women, we need a balance. So we're getting multiple voices, because when you have, all those voices that are contributing from different points of view, you're going to end up in a better place. And of course, it's not just having the people who fit those definitions, but it's making sure that everyone in the department has a voice. It can't be a hierarchical, I'm the boss, I tell you how it's going to be. But you want to be encouraging every person in your department. You want to make them feel that their observations and their suggestions are going to be treated seriously. Even you might not do everything, right? You can't do every single project or implement every single idea. But if you make people feel like their suggestions are going to be listened to and considered, and you will open up the doors to I think, great advances.
Yeah, it pleases me to see departments actually hire data people, hire IT folks, hire various other professionals. And I've heard different predictions of how law firms and legal departments will change in terms of how it will increase the percentage of other professionals in the legal department and law firms. So what do you think? Where are we going? Like for a company like yours, where do you think, what percentage do you think other professionals should be in the legal department?
So I think we're a long way from that type of journey. I think that for a company like Cognizant, you probably want to have at least 30% of your department not be senior attorneys. Maybe it's some, a mix, some paralegals and support people, not all, obviously, technologists, data analysts, and project managers. But I think that you really need for each large practice area, you need a dedicated project manager. And then for some of the smaller ones, maybe you could have, one person that kind of covers all of them. But if you really want to create change, then you need to allow the attorneys to do the legal work. And those, you want their suggestions. So you want to encourage them to be thinking about change and thinking about operations and process. But you can't have your attorneys be responsible for the implementation of that change. You need to have someone who has the time to make that what they're doing all the time, instead of the little pockets of time that you can find as an attorney.
Yeah, I ask this question a lot of legal operators and enlightened legal leaders who operationalize their practices. The number I get somewhere between 20 and 60%. 30 is about probably an average 30-40%. And a lot of it is project management, financial kind of capabilities, data capabilities, technology capabilities that, it's, you really, and it's kind of funny that we find it so revolutionary to say, let lawyers be lawyers. Isn't that a crazy idea? Let lawyers be lawyers. It only makes sense, especially because law schools traditionally, teach this idea of specialization, right? The classic example you usually hear in law school is that you may be better at doing sort of various routine jobs, including proofreading and doing the brief, but you should really outsource the brief proofreading to your executive assistant or your paralegal, because that's a classic sort of competitive advantage. And you do the brief, they do the proofreading. That's how you trade and optimize the outcome of the world.
Absolutely. Let's be frank. Lawyers are expensive resources. You don't want them doing work that other people can do less expensively and more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to see that also apply outside of proofreading to project management, data, technology, financials, all of it. Let's talk about, if I were to, I've decided to modernize my legal department. I think that's a great idea. Where do I begin?
Well, I think, you starting with the right place, which is, I wanted to make change, right? That's the attitude. I think you want to give you want to spend some time doing training. You want to, encourage, a lot of law firms will do, and third-party consultants will do lean for legal trainings. So I would definitely encourage you to consider that. I would have, the people who are doing the work are the ones that are best positioned to identify ways that work can be done better. And so I think it's worthwhile to go to everyone that works with you and say, we're going to have a contest. Everyone submit your ideas, work in teams, work in cross-functional teams. And then, you can just, when things come in, things that take no effort, low-hanging fruit, you just do. And then the things that are harder, you prioritize them, you calculate ROIs, and you choose one or you choose two, depending on what bandwidth and resources you have available, and work on it. But I think as you do that, it's really, really important that you also go to your internal clients and you say, what do you like about working with us? What don't you like about working with us? And have them be collaborators in the process so that you deliver a product in the end or a service in the end that really satisfies not what just within your team see as the need, but as something that the whole company as a whole will see the value and benefit from. Cross-functional connections outside of legal, I think, are really, really important to getting to that ideal state.
Really having a sense who your client is and what they want and what makes their day and what really doesn't make their day, I think is absolutely critical, because as you said, we are in business of providing services. We're almost coming to the end. I want to explore maybe a couple of ideas. One of them is, you talked about the traditional legal department being very hierarchical. What do you think the legal department of the future would look like? Will you think this triangle is something that will continue, or this sort of hierarchical, something that businesses have embraced more readily in the past, or do you think that will change kind of in the same way as, business world is changing?
I think it has to change. I think there's still a pyramid, but it looks different. It's not a pyramid of people. It's a pyramid of approaches. So you want to stratify your legal work. Anything that can be automated, that can be turned into self-help resources, or that can be pushed to junior or non-lawyer resources should be dealt with, so that work can be done efficiently, consistently, and doesn't take the, you want to move, I've heard this a number of times, but I think it's true that you want to move your senior lawyers up the value chain. And to move those senior lawyers up the value chain, you need to empower them. So the people who are providing subjective, legal opinions, so to speak, they need to be, they need a couple of things. One, I think that every attorney in the future is going to be a privacy attorney, a technology attorney, as well as whatever practice area they're in. I don't think you can escape that. I think data and privacy are ubiquitous in every part of every business today, and every business is reliant on digital technologies, and you have to understand those areas. But then you want those attorneys that are servicing the business lines to be able to, make decisions and make decisions quickly. So they need to be integrated into the business. They need to be embedded, meeting with the business, knowing what the business issues are, as if every one of them, anyone who supports a business area or business function, kind of needs to be a mini GC for that business area. And so you need to free up their time so they're not doing the noise where they're not adding value. And then they need to be empowered where they can provide value, to really provide value without having to raise it up to the chain every time.
I love that vision. That's a beautiful vision. You had another part in your vision, of legal department, and that is greater collaboration.
Yes.
And kind of democracy of ideas and implementation. Tell me more about that, and then maybe how we get there.
So, I think, it goes a little bit into that, the agile model that everyone is, I think everywhere in the world is adopting, in order to make decisions well, you have to see the bigger picture. You can't do things in a vacuum. If I go to a business person and I say, this is the way we're doing things from now on, they're going to be like, nah. You have to explain. They have to understand and see the same vision that you see of why it's important to do it, and how it's going to benefit them and how it's going to benefit the company. And if you silo yourself, you're going to lose out on a lot of benefits that can come. So like going back to that data loop that we talked about with contracting, if you're not collaborative, if you're not working with your delivery teams, with the operations individuals, with finance, with security, as you go through that process, with sales, you're not going to be able to effectively implement that kind of loop.
Yeah, contracts is like where the whole organization comes together, because contracts is often tied directly to revenue, especially on the sales side, and everybody cares about it. That's only the blood of the business, so it only makes sense. So everybody will have an opinion, from security to sales to customer success to product to legal. So it's really a true place where, you need to be able to collaborate effectively, efficiently, real time, and really get the job done so you can have the revenue flow through your business, which is critical.
Yes, absolutely. And it also comes down to what we were talking about before with the lawyer non-lawyer dichotomy, that you need to, as a lawyer, make sure that you are, just like your expertise might be respected by the people you're working with, you need to make sure that you are respecting their expertise and showing that you see the value in what they're bringing to the table, because it will make them want to partner with you. Yes
to that. Yes, I completely agree. Because we are professionals, but they are professionals too.
Yes.
They may or may not have gone to school or had many years of experience, but their skill, their craft, took a while to perfect, just like ours.
Exactly.
And deferring to their expertise and learning from them and having this productive dialogue and collaborating. If you can do it well, I definitely seen kind of where 1 + 1 leads to more than 2, where the two professionals really highly respect each other and just, create something beautiful in the process through collaboration. Laurie, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much from you, and I really enjoyed you sharing your journey from an IP lawyer to transactional lawyer to somebody who has become very interested in the business and wants to operationalize and help everybody else succeed. And in the process, you found your passion and created your job. Thank you for sharing your insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for talking with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.